Welcome to the Reinventing Education podcast, where today our guests are from the Community Connection podcast. The Community Connection is an educational podcast that connects educators with authors, thought leaders, and innovators from all across the world. Hosts Nate Provencio and Dr. Eric Worcester lean into relevant topics that teachers and school leaders need in order to build effective school cultures that ensure high levels of learning for all students. Now, in this episode, Brendan and I mediate a conversation between the three types of school: expert, coach, and counselor. Eric taking a stance for the expert, Nate for the coach, and Brendan from time to time sneaking in the case for the counselor. I really like this episode, and I hope you do too, because it highlights why and how each of us has different priorities and answers when it comes to the question, what does a good education or what does a good school look like? Find links to Nate and Eric's work in the episode description. Enjoy. So we've got Nate and Eric with us. I thoroughly enjoyed being on their podcast, The Community Connection. And what was really cool was at the end of our conversation, we kind of had 10 minutes after the mics were turned off, and we were starting to tease apart personal connections about the ideas of the three types of school: expert, coach, and counselor. Nate, it became clear that you were leaning coach in our conversation. Eric, you were making a good case for the strengths and the good parts of the expert. So we brought you here today, and we're hoping that Brendan and I can kind of facilitate a conversation to tease apart some of these subtle differences of them. So thanks, first of all, so much for being here.
Well, you know what they say, all the good stuff doesn't happen at the party, it happens at the after party, you know? So yeah, that's where you want to be. That's where you want to be.
And Eric and Nate, maybe you guys can just introduce yourselves a little bit first, give our listeners a sense of who you are, and then we'll dive into what matters to you folks in education.
Hey, everybody. So I have been in education for a slick 25 years. I've done a lot of things. My first year of teaching, I got the chance to teach overseas in Slovakia, in Bratislava, beautiful city, highly recommend it. Came back to the States, wasn't prepared for students who didn't call me professor and listen to everything that I said and hang on my words. So it was a bit of a culture shock coming back and teaching in my own country. I was a special educator for a while. I was a instructional technology coach for a while. And then I became an assistant principal. I had the chance as an assistant principal to open up what is now, I think, the largest Title I school in the county where I work. And that was a powerful, formative, challenging experience. And then after that, I went on to open the only K through 8 county as a principal in my county. And since then, I've been working in professional learning after my post-principalship. And I've loved the opportunity to also host this podcast with Nathaniel, the Community Connection. Nathaniel, what do you got, pal?
Oh, my goodness gracious. Gosh, I guess, 25 years. Yeah, but if you really look at it, 40 years. When did I start school? When I was 4. So I don't know, man. So I've been in schools my whole life, right? And but yeah, man. Third grade teacher here in the Northern Virginia, DC area for 6 years. Loved it. I was an assistant principal for about three and a half years. Principal for 9 years. At a Title I school, very, very diverse school, 80% free and reduced lunch, 80% second language learner, and 80% eventually one of the top 80% in the state. So we were always really proud of that. And then I got the bug to go into the superintendency, and I was an associate superintendent over about 20 schools. The year before COVID, the year during COVID, and the year after COVID. And then I was like, screw this, I'm out. So like, I got nothing left in me, man. And then, and so I started becoming a full-time national leadership school consultant. So I get to travel around schools across America and just help them, polish their excellence, man. And so then because I don't have anything else to do, we started a podcast, an educational leadership podcast. It's actually been a lot of fun. So I feel like Eric and I were talking the other day that through this podcast, I kind of feel like flowers for Algernon, where the guy just like his brain is just growing so much because you're around all these great leaders and great educators and thought leaders. And I've learned so much. Like every episode is a masterclass. And so it's been really, really cool.
You got to be careful, though. Have you read the end of that book?
Yeah, it doesn't go very well. We'll just stop at like chapter 10.
Yeah, exactly. I stop here. Yeah, I've obviously Rob had the chance to chat with you about his crazy idea of 3 different types of schools that I'm on board with the premise of our podcast. I just wondered if your takeaway. Now you've had I guess a few weeks to kind of have that idea in your head. Is there any like big things that strike you as like, oh, that makes sense, or is like, hold on, this just sounds like some made up pseudoscience, as I like to point out from time to time.
I think the benefit of it, I think it's always powerful as a leader to know thyself. Speaking of aphorisms, I think it's great to have an idea of your default setting, both so you can lean into your strengths and overcome any challenges you have. So I think a context for your leadership and having that idea it's a very powerful thing. So that's what I took away. Anything that can help our leaders know themselves better will make them better leaders. Whatever their default setting is, I think it will help. Provencio?
Yeah, gosh, I don't want to sound negative over here, but I always think about like brand new school leaders, school principals coming into their school. And I'm always amazed at just how ill prepared and ill trained they are. I mean, I just mean that with all sincerity. It's not their fault. The training that we do in general is piss poor. I don't know how it is in Japan. I don't know how it is in Belgium or Canada, but like, I'm just like, man, we just set this cat up for failure. And as soon as these principals come in, I see them trying to make an impact, and the impact that they try to make is very managerial. It's like, if I can just handle this discipline issue, if I can just handle this car rider line, if I can just handle this toilet paper crisis, if I could just do these tangible managerial things, I'll feel like I'm making an impact, or I'm making a place for myself, And I'm like, that shit's just like, let someone else do that. You were not hired to be a custodian. I mean, you're not hired to be you're hired to be an instructional leader. And I just don't feel a lot of our principals get that. And I could be totally wrong. This is just general. I'm just going there. So the idea of saying, well, am I a coach in this situation? Do I have an expert lens? Am I more of a counselor? Like Eric was saying, kind of like that self-awareness goes a long way in helping us be instructional leaders. And I just feel like we're putting our leaders in the middle of crisis and giving them a fire extinguisher. But we're not really giving them the kind of like, I don't know, maybe autonomy to take the time to reflect and say, what type of leader do you want to be? What type of leaders are your teachers? What kind of school do you want to be? What is your vision? What is your mission? What is your goals? And just be the world's best at that. All that other shit's going to take care of itself, right? It's all, but like, you're not going to meet your vision by opening up car doors for kids. I'm sorry. It's important. It ain't that important, but
those are easy wins, pal. Those are like when I think the managerial part, I think that's something you can say you've accomplished. You can check it off a list and you've got that feeling of satisfaction of having done something. And education leadership is the big picture. And that's where you want to arrive. Those managerial things, sometimes it's just, I did this. I made a kid smile. That's why I like this job.
I get it. I get it. Hear me out. Jeff Bezos is not opening up cars for his employees. Now,
maybe he should.
Maybe he should.
Not every day.
Listen,
I'm not saying every morning. I'm saying once in a while.
Look, I'll pull weeds, brother.
Brendan,
like I remember as a principal, I would go outside. I mean, I did things. I needed some easy wins. Sometimes my easy win, Rob, was just literally pulling the weeds from my garden in the front of my school. Because hell, if I could just pull a couple dandelions, hell, at least I did something today.
You know what? Rob's laughing, right? So, Rob, why are you laughing here? Because this is textbook, right? Go on.
Well, okay. So to go back to 2 points you guys have made to make my point, Eric, you mentioned default setting. And I think this is so important. If we want leaders to know who they are, they need to see what values they have that inform their default setting. Because that's the core of these three types, is saying all of us want to do a good job. All of us want to contribute meaningfully, but I see three very different and even contradictory ways to do school leadership well. And then to your point, Nate, like when you get hired as a leader, you're just told you're a leader. No one steps you back and says, oh, by the way, there are these three very distinct, essentially different job description approaches to being a leader. What it means to be a great expert leader, or a leader that can serve an expert school. Completely different job description to the to the leader that would lead a coach school, and completely different from the job description of someone who would be crushing it in a counselor school. So I think Brendan's pointing out me laughing a little bit, because we can start to see, I think, some of that tension between the different conceptions of what the role of a leader is. Yeah. Between these two schools.
Let me ask this question to Eric. Eric, why should we be opening doors and pulling weeds, and why is that kind of the straw man version of what you're really doing in those when you're doing those jobs?
And I'm like Nathaniel said, I know he did this as a school leader as well, because it's part of being a leader.
I'm not attacking Nate, by the way. This is just a conversation.
Attack me. I'll do that. I have no problem with that. But you do those things as a leader to show everyone, to me, that no, you're part of that school community. Belonging is a big element in a successful school. So me opening doors, greeting my customers, which is my parents and my students, and showing my staff that I'll be out there as well doing those things. And you're showing them that there's nothing at the school that you're above, which I think is a really important lesson for a school community. Is I'll be the nurse, I'll be the custodian, I'll be the front office, I'll do any of those. Yes, like Nathaniel said, that doesn't necessarily advance instructional leadership, but it does advance building leadership. Both are critically important. It is easier to have those small wins. It's easier to have the friendly interaction in the front office, or to see a freshly weeded garden and know that you did that. Instructional leadership, it's harder to see the results of your work, and it might get worse before it gets better. So I think you need a balance of those easy-ish wins and the long-term struggle.
If it could, Eric, tell me how accurate I am here. Underneath those actions, one of the things that it's doing is building trust and security amongst the staff, amongst the school community. Parents see you, students know you. It's building up trust, security, and I would say, and shows you are showing up and being responsible. It's daily visual evidence of that. Yeah. Does that capture it?
Totally.
So I would then flip that to Nate and say, okay, you're doing that, of course, you're saying hi to people, and you're being a meaningful part of the community, but you're not, you're trying to keep that part of it just to kind of, kind of stuff that's good to do, not filling up too much of the time in your day. So what is the thing that you are in this kind of, imagining we're the principal in the school, what are you spending your day doing?
Yeah, like so the win, those little easy wins, right? And I think those things it's like, it's the intentional. It's like, why? And that's what I would want for principals to know. And even with like me, okay, it's like, I'm not I'll go outside in the rain and the hell and the snow and all that stuff. And I'll be the principal valet on every now and then. I'm always going to say hi to every single kid every single day. I'm always going to say hi and check in with every teacher every single day. But it's interesting, but I'm also going to be there at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning, so I can get all the unglamorous shit done, everything. And then I'm going to have that little time to check in with my constituents. I'm going to check in with everybody. I think what I see is, and I'll try to answer this question in a roundabout way, is when those easy wins become your dopamine fix. And you feel good about those easy wins so much that you unintentionally keep gravitating to those things. And then your default mechanism is just to be a caretaker, and not a leader. And I think the whole point of a leader is there's a reason why leading means you're out in front. And sometimes you're in front of the tribe. Sometimes you're in the middle of the tribe. Sometimes you're behind the tribe. But you are putting yourself in a position that is separate. And I think a lot of leaders don't realize their job is to, and this is my lens, one of my roles, Rob, is to think. You're the chief thinker in your organization. So I'll go back to like the Bezos, like he's not opening doors, he's thinking. I mean, I don't know what the hell he's doing now, to be quite honest with you, but in general, he's trying to create a vision. He's trying to lead his organization. And that's why you have a vision, because that's the place you're trying to get to. And for me, and like, so if you're a coach in that role and you're more collaborative, you're trying to figure out how to collaborate with your teams to achieve that vision. If you're an expert, then you've got knowledge that maybe your staff doesn't necessarily have, but you also want to give them that knowledge as well in order to achieve that vision. And if you're more of the counselor, kind of like the affective kind of person, and I'm thinking this more of with your staff, not necessarily with your students, but with your staff, trying to make sure that everyone has a voice in order to achieve that vision. And maybe that vision is what everyone else is coming up with. So that to me does more than opening up car doors in the morning. And for me, I would rather spend the time thinking in my office and not feeling ashamed about doing that, of how to get my staff to that vision today. I got 180 days to move my staff from point A to point F or whatever it is. And I can't do that necessarily if I'm always putting out those little bitty fires. And so for me, that's why that's why you have an office as a principal and not a classroom. That's why you have some other things, it's because you're entrusted to lead that organization to a place that they've never seen before. My challenge with leadership training and where I see principals now, that conversation is not happening at all. And it's crazy because like every leadership book that you ever see is about that. I don't remember in my master's level course ever taking, valet principalship, 101. I'm not saying it's not important, but if you're always finding yourself doing that, you're not leading, you're just surviving.
One of our premises on the show is that all three of these types have incredible gifts and all three are good ways to do school, but it reveals our priorities. So if I can just check with you, whereas Eric's example said, the reason you're out there opening doors or the other variety, the 20 other things that you do to build that trust and security, that's a bigger priority for him. Whereas we're saying with your type, what I'm hearing is more of a priority on achievement and doing so effectively and efficiently. So of course you value security and trust in staff, but if you had to pick one or the other, it sounds like you're saying, no, I would prioritize my time to do the things that would lead to goal achieving, personal bests, institutional bests, that side of things.
Yeah.
Does that line well?
And then the car lines are going to take a lot slower because I'm not out there either. So,
anybody an Edward Hopper fan? The painter, the artist.
Oh yeah.
So I was picturing like when Nathaniel was talking about it being his office, like this Edward Hopper kind of painting where he's just sitting there thinking, and the sun's shining in. This is the one I just looked up. It's hard to see.
Yeah,
that's
exactly right.
The night cafe. Yeah. I think what a little bit of what's being talked about here is the unhealthy aspect, which I guess you probably wouldn't get into much with Rob. It's like on the podcast when you talked, is like you can be that kind of coach, but you can be a really unhealthy version. And the unhealthy version of the coach would be the guy who's nipping off to like put out fires left, right, and center because they're not focusing on the thing that's relevant to the school. So it's kind of, however, the unhealthy version of the expert is someone who's constantly going in their office for long periods of time when they may not necessarily be doing the kind of data crunching or the kind of building of the curriculum that's because their school is a little bit more, I guess, community based in that kind of way. And a lot of us are in a mainstream context, which is leaning towards the coach. So there's a bias towards kind of, if you're in that context, you're probably going to fit better if you're a coach. But I know it's a little bit of an irony in our conversation is that we're acting almost in the counselor kind of approach, which we haven't talked about much. We're unpacking these ideas together. Maybe I can throw this out to you. How do you see that counselor approach? Or if you're not quite sure what we mean by it, if you have questions of like our definition of that, how do you see that being relevant in the sort of schools you work in 2025, which does have that much more coach mainstream bias generally?
I always kind of, thought of you as more of the kind of like counselor, Eric, like, because you like one of the things that we talk about all the time, Eric, you hired really fantastic teachers.
Yep.
And you left them alone, ish. But you really trusted their input and their value to kind of have that kind of like consensus. So, that I always appreciated, that style from you. It's a different style for me, but I always appreciated that.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. I saw my role as a principal as finding the best talent available. So that the highest draft pick, that's who I wanted at my school. It might not be the same way that I do things. And I was very fine with that because I didn't need a school full of Eric clones. I needed the school full of the best teachers I could find. So I saw my role more to help them succeed. That was ultimately. I'm not sure that that's a counselor, if that's more of a coach.
Mm-hmm. I guess the defining part, one of the defining parts would be to what extent did they set not only their own strategies but their own goals, and kind of like how broad were they? Because one of the things when I worked in England versus where I am now is I'd say the goals I'm kind of encouraged to set now are quite broad. They don't need to be kind of specifically about one part of the curriculum. Whereas in England, I was almost more or less told them, your job is to get these 4 kids up this number of reading levels in this. And it's like, it's a very noble goal, but I don't have a lot of say in the goal. I might have some say in the strategy, but I'd say that as you move into a more counselor-centered approach, you are trying to bring out from those teachers and those students what is important and meaningful to them, and allowing them not only the strategies but also to choose the goals as well.
Brendan, I think we had the same experience. I would normally ask teachers to pick like 2 very big, broad goals for the year. I would give them one, and they would create one. Guess which one they cared about. Exactly,
yeah. But still, the hard thing is to get us to do them, because we might be interested in the goal, but good leadership, as I think Nate was talking about, is like, well, I got all these people, they might have these goals, and some of them are internal, external, some of them are personal. How do we actually support them? It's a much more complex than just telling everybody we've got to meet this set of goals.
Yep. I think for us, for the goal that we would set, because that was, again, they're the less popular one, we had to have some accountability measures in place. So we would have to collect things as an admin team to ensure that the one that they were a little less invested in was actually progressing towards that. And they had a lot of desire to see their own goals succeed because they picked it as an area of interest for them. So whenever I could loop those 2 things together, that's a powerful thing. Your area of interest and the school's goals as well. When you combine that, you get a Voltron thing, you get a flaming sword or blazing sword. What is it, Provencio?
Flaming sword.
Flaming sword, which sounds awkward to say out loud. But
that is what we want.
Yeah, that's what you want. But you can accomplish so much when you're all going in the same direction. But especially when you're tying in your own personal areas of interest, which I would try to do because I wanted my teachers to have that kind of that skin in the game.
The way that I would rephrase that in some of the language that I've used in our work is just to say, like you said, Eric, you hire good people, you get out of their way.
Yep.
So don't put any barriers in their way to them doing good work, set them up for success. And like you said, with the goal setting, like, hey, we still have some responsibility you need to uphold in terms of goals with the institution, but we're also going to trust your professional discernment and your professional judgment to pick the other goal. So there's still that like interplay of, of course, you're still part of a pyramid. There's a hierarchy, there's a structure. It's not all free reign, but there's a balance of responsibilities you have as part of this institution. And we totally trust your judgment. You're the number one draft pick, like you're in.
And that was the thing for me, because I mean, even elementary schools, K to 6, you've got them for K to 5 or K to 6, you got them for 6 or 7 years. I had them 9 years at my school. So the things that you do in kindergarten, you don't realize it. They make an impact when you get to 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So that might not be your lens as a teacher. You're seeing them for that 1 year. We are seeing them for 9. So some of these goals have to have a broader reach than just that year.
Here's a loaded question. What's the biggest problem in education, and how do we solve it?
Internationally, or
let's stay nationally where you are. Although we may want to veer away from certain areas of politics at this point.
I don't know, man. At this point, I don't care, man. I'm worried. I might say the wrong thing. I might end up in Brussels.
One that you think is solvable, the one that's within our realm of kind of working on, at least.
Here is and it's funny because right now, like, I can't answer that question without sounding political, and this is just in the context of the time. And there's 50 things that I would, and we have, on the Community Connection podcast, we have secretaries of education come on, we have national leaders come on, so like we're learning a lot about it. But our educators, it's easier to cast a vote than it is to protest when something goes wrong. I'm going to repeat that. It's easier to cast a vote than it is to argue and debate when things go wrong. I just don't think our educators understand how much their vote counts when it comes to voting in their interest about what's happening. So I think that educators have a very powerful voice, because now education and politics are so intermingled, whether we like it or not, at the state level, at the national level. And I think there needs to be more educators that have been in the classroom to represent educators at the state and national level. And I think if we could start finding our own voice in a bigger platform and understand that every educator is a leader, and that once we know ourselves, whether that's the coach, expert, counselor, or all the above, we have to be able to lead our constituents. And so many of folks at the national level that are making decisions on behalf of educators have never set foot in a classroom. And I think that is one of the perspective, and the empathy is so lost when it comes to education. So if educators can understand that they have this wonderful opportunity as leaders to advocate for I think better decisions would be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was trying to see how we were approaching that problem, and it is quite a direct approach that we would take the action. We would vote. We would, wherever possible, engage with our political leaders, and possibly even, if it appealed to us, move in that direction ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that a lot of the more counselor-centered type of education, which is called progressive, is predicated on action, which is not something that happens necessarily in the coach and expert. It can, but those sort of schools, again, without getting too political, those sort of schools are the ones that, in theory at least, are bringing critical thinking into the curriculum, and actually hopefully working with the idea that the dialogue leads us to taking meaningful action in our community. So yes,
I didn't realize I'm facilitating a conversation with an expert coach and someone who keeps defending the counselor here, Brendan. Thank you.
I know.
Eric?
I need to.
Eric, biggest problem in education? How do we approach it?
Yeah. So first thing I want to say is about the politics. I think education, at least in the U.S., has always been political. I think what we're seeing now is there are additional loud voices in the mix. So where there was one loud voice, now there are many, and that can be a challenging shift. The biggest problem that I see is kind of the prestige of education, which leads to a lack of just a workforce. So we're seeing that, I think, all across the country. And it's not necessarily a new issue, but it's gotten incredibly more challenging. I mentioned when I was principal, that was 4 years ago. I had a lot of applicants for my positions. I did a lot to try to set myself up so my school would be popular with those great teachers. But I think if I were a principal now, I think I'd be seeing challenges like everybody else was a few years ago. So when you don't have those opportunities to get people who are dedicated to their craft, our schools are going to be very different. I think what goes along with that is just a professional learning mindset that we don't always see in education. And I understand a little bit why we don't, but I wish we had more of that, more of what does research say, instead of just, I think, what they would call hobby teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, Nathaniel, I think you mean by that what you're teaching, not how you're teaching, but I think both are important, that we could expend more energy on how. And just we tend not to have that professional learning mindset. In my position, I get to work with a lot of teachers from overseas, and they have that mindset. So we love working with them because they are so eager and hungry. And when we talk about strategies, they're thinking, how can I incorporate this into my teaching? They're not thinking about checking Facebook or TikTok or Instagram.
Wow.
It's that mindset of wanting to engage in your craft and become better. And I wish we had more of that.
Yeah, and the desire to contribute meaningfully is the way I keep bringing that back. Is expert coaches and counselors all have their vision of how they would like to contribute meaningfully. I have my eye on the clock because I know you guys it's morning there and you've got busy work days ahead of you. In our closing 2 or 3 minutes here, I wonder if we could just quickly revisit where our conversation left off last time. The after party of our podcast chat involved bringing up this idea of field trips. And I threw out, the classic example of, the kindergarten class goes to the apple orchard in October. It's a tradition. It's an enjoyable thing. Like I was saying to Eric, it's one of the 12 things I remember from my 8 years in public education as a really positive experience. Eric was defending it. Nate was questioning, why are we upholding this tradition? Why are we going? What's the purpose? I wondered if we could just reopen that wound for a second, just to explore the pro going to the kindergarten orchard trip and Nate's questioning, and maybe we can just tie up some subtle differences between coach and expert perspectives as we wrap up. So, Eric, why should that kindergarten class be going to the apple orchard every October?
I wanted the second so I could repeat it. But part of school is, like I said earlier, it is tying people in and giving them meaningful experiences that make them belong. Now, I think going to the apple orchard, there are a lot of academic tie-ins that are possible with doing that. So I'll say that I don't know if you did that, but it's certainly possible to do that effectively and have it be much more meaningful than many other just stale classroom learning things that you can do. Even if you didn't do that, I'll say you just went there, picked some apples, threw some apples, found some worms, had some fun. If that made you love school, and that got you more engaged with the other 190 days that you were there, it was also worthwhile. So just for that, for the sense of belonging and engagement and love and memories that you formed, there are so many lessons that year I'm sure you forgot. That one stuck with you. And that's what I want. I want school to be a place where people and adults look back and have incredible memories. It sounds like that did it for you. So for all those reasons, I think those kinds of experiential things are really important. Nathaniel?
Please tell us why you don't want people to have good times at school. Go for it.
Oh, man. So I got Johnny Appleseed over here. Okay. All right. So I'm not saying the apple orchard isn't a decent field trip. What I am saying is you've been doing that damn apple orchard field trip for 20 freaking years because you're on autopilot and you're not thinking about what else is better out there. So if we're going to say if we're saying yes to going to the apple orchard, we're saying no to something else. If we're saying yes to the same damn apple orchard, we're saying no to something else. So why we're saying yes to the apple orchard is because we don't value our inputs and our thoughts about another field trip to go to. If we're saying yes to going to the apple orchard, it's because we don't feel safe enough to have some collective inquiry about better field trip opportunities to go to. So it's not the apple orchard, it's the experience. If the apple orchard is aligned to our vision and mission, if we're intentional about it, and we've got the answers, go to the damn apple orchard. Pick the apples, McIntosh, Granny Smith, Rambo, pick the apples, man. But if we said yes to that, what were we saying no to? So I think that it's not about the apple orchard. It's about the experiences and having your teachers in a collaborative way be able to say, is there something better out there that could be better benefit our students? Because if all your kids have been to an apple orchard, why are you going? If none of your kids don't even know what apple is, okay, well, maybe you should go. But have we had that discussion?
But of course, fundamentally, if the children aren't choosing it, it lacks meaning anyway. So you're both wrong.
Possibly. Or maybe we don't even have any funds to go anywhere anymore. I mean, I don't know. We spent all our field trip funds on these damn MacBooks. So now we just have to watch a YouTube video on the stupid apples. So who knows?
The wrong type of apple. Yeah. So, but a good case made by both, and I think it highlights that perspective of whether or not we bring in the community, whether we try new ideas, whether we're connecting it to learning, and again, I think the mission and vision there, right? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah. For me, what I heard, it was both of you made a good case for going to, or maybe even not going to the apple orchard, because Eric's making the case for belonging. Whatever we're doing is serving an investment in you feeling like you belong here, you value it, you want to be here. And I hear Nate's coming through. Whatever it is that we do, we want to maximize opportunities. We want to be the most efficient, the most effective thing that we can do with our time. And I think both are right. And then whatever hippie stuff Brendan was talking about, each of these is an approach to doing school well. And with an eye on the time, I just want to say, Nate, Eric, this has been really energizing to chat with you folks. And thanks for your willingness to explore these ideas and push and play back a little bit with each other here.
Heck yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah. Much appreciated.
Good to see you, Johnny Appleseed.